As folks who design, deploy, and maintain monitoring solutions, it's easy for us to poke, hopefully good-natured fun, at our less technical colleagues. But we have a choice. We can continue to diminish and dismiss people who don't know our discipline the way that we do, or we can step up and we can educate and help them to understand what we're doing. It's in this spirit that we set up a survey asking managers, the people who lead and represent the boots on the ground technical folks who do the monitoring day in and day out, what they wanted to know. We wanted to arm them with the information they needed to be better leaders of the technicians who build and maintain monitoring solutions, and also to be a better representative of monitoring tech and teams in the boardroom. The first question we asked on the survey was, what was something, a technical concept, a book, a website, etc., you wish you'd known before you started managing people who did monitoring? And we got some really interesting responses here because it gives people a chance to go back and say what I would have told the younger version of me or something like that. The first response I want to call out is, I wish I'd been exposed to monitoring in some way before I was given management of the monitoring team. A quote, dummies guide to monitoring basics using SolarWinds would have been really helpful. Boy, do we have resources for you. If you're in the same position or you're wishing it now, there's a few things. And these are all going to be linked in the session notes. So don't worry about you scribbling things down. They're all out there. The first one is Monitoring 101. We actually have one of those. This covers the foundational aspects of monitoring, regardless of which vendor or which software, which tool you're using. There's just some basic things, maybe a handful or two techniques. It doesn't matter what you're using. They're going to use these. The differentiator is how easy it is to implement and how easy it is to get data back out of it. It's also really good for people who aren't doing monitoring or managing people who do monitoring, but it's for people who are consuming the result of monitoring but don't know how it got there. So let's say the server team, the network team, the application team that isn't sure how someone is going to get at that stuff. Monitoring 101 is a great ebook, and it's free, to be able to give them that basic understanding. Monitoring 201 picks up where 101 left off for the monitoring engineer. It says, hey, you've been implementing these very common things, and you probably haven't been doing them the most efficient way, or there's a way to make it even more meaningful or enhance the things that you're doing. And even some things like maybe you thought it wasn't possible to do XYZ. Monitoring 201 gives you all of those techniques. And the third book, Automation Not Art, is a way of taking it even a step further than that. It lets you take your monitoring, which is the collection of data, and then a lot of people include alerting into that sequence. And then what do you do after that? Well, you automate the response so that humans have to get involved less often. So those three ebooks especially create a foundational aspect of what monitoring is and what it's capable of that will let you, the manager, be able to promote that both within your entire organization as a center of excellence and also to the people that you report to who are saying, well, I just don't understand what the guys are doing all the time. This gives you a chance to do that. There's also, very specifically what you asked for, a network monitoring for dummies. We contracted with Wiley Press and put out a dummies book. Now, it has a lot of the same information you found in the three books I just mentioned, but if you like the dummies format, it's in the dummies format. And I just have to point out, there is overlap between all of those books. But when you take them together, they take you all the way from the basic foundational concepts of monitoring through some of the really neat tricks you can do that make monitoring not just one of those check boxes you have to do because audit says so, and into something where people are saying, no, this is actually a business critical service that we offer now. The second response, make sure processes are known through the team structure, upstream from the NOC, and how issues must get passed across and managed through the chain. We received several questions that revolved around the concept of understanding and communicating processes, helping the business understand existing workload, and also setting boundaries for the monitoring team. How do we say what's inbounds and what's out of bounds for them to do at a given time? It's a really important thing to do. How you do it? There's obviously several different ways that this can be done depending on your corporate culture and depending on what kind of information is needed. A lot of this exists outside the bounds of a monitoring solution itself, in the sense that monitoring tells you how the environment is doing, but it doesn't really tell you the workload of things that are being built at that time or anything like that. What's the context of that big bleeping red screen or blinky or whatever it is? And I'm going to get to that in a little bit. But as far as communicating workload and also understanding what the processes are, I think there's a few things. There's a session we did last year at THWAC Camp called the 4 questions that every monitoring engineer is asked. And within that session, we talked about the supporting documentation or the supporting processes that help people know things like, why did I get the alert? Why didn't I get the alert? Which I'll talk about in a minute. How do I know what's being monitored on my systems? Things like that. It's worth reviewing that THWAC Camp 2019 session also, because there are some documentation hints in there. For helping understand workload, one of the things is basically a workbook or a run book that you can give people that says, when you stand up a Nexus switch or you stand up a Java-based application, here are the things that we're going to monitor by default, just because you handed it to us and that's what we're going to do. And here are the things we could be doing if you ask us about it. And that's a wonderful thing also to hand up to your managers to say, look, these are the things that we're doing or could be doing for any application. That gives you a sense of workload. When a new application comes on, look, we've got to spin up a monitor for this and this and this and this. These are all of our baselines, and these are all the things they might be asking for. That's one way to communicate it. Your service desk tool probably is a great place to be able to get those metrics in terms of the things that are being worked on at the moment. And I am going to talk about the service desk tool, whether it's the SolarWinds Service Desk or just a ticketing tool, in a little bit. The second question in the survey was, what is one question the managers above you ask that you wish you could answer without going to staff? And we ask that because we know how frustrating it is to not have the answers at your fingertips, but also not to have that technical credibility in front of your superiors, for lack of a better word. You want to be able to answer certain things, even if you say, look, I'm pretty sure it's this, but I'll go back and get you the final answer. So that was why we asked it. The first response, why didn't we get an alert for X? And this goes back to the session I talked about earlier, the THWAC Camp 2019, the 4 questions every monitoring engineer is asked, because not just you as a manager are being asked, but engineers are asked that all the time. The difference is that when a monitoring engineer is asked it, they really are going to be providing a technical answer. Well, we had a blackout window or it was on mute, or because the process chain had a problem over here, or a system crash, whatever it is, right? Whereas the people who are asking you are asking for a more holistic and a more general kind of answer. They're not looking for the technical details. So while the 2019 session is a good place to start, I actually think that another tactic is to put it back on the people asking and say, how did you think that was supposed to go? What was it that you were expecting to happen in that process? And the reason why is that it'll give you an opportunity to do 2 things. First of all, you can confirm or correct mistaken opinions about how the environment is designed. For example, I didn't think that things in the cloud were going to show down ever. I thought it was, well, no, actually, it's still going to show down if we can't get to it or whatever it is. So it gives you a chance to correct mistaken opinions about some aspect of your environment with your upper management. The second thing it gives you a chance to do is to find out that you might not be monitoring certain parts of the environment that really do need to be monitored. Why didn't we know that XYZ system was down? Well, I asked 6 months ago and I was told not to monitor that. Well, no, it has to be. Oh, okay. Those kinds of things. You run into them all the time. But when you're asking for, the executive's opinion of what should and shouldn't be monitored, what is and isn't business critical, that gives you valuable information, because now you can go back and find out what it's going to take to bring those things into monitoring. And when you bring that back, and it's got a cost, whether that's in time or in dollars or whatever, you can say, you told me it was critical, so let's get some, resources behind it and get that done. That's another reason why you want to put it back. Ultimately, though, the answer to why I didn't get a particular alert has a variety of different responses depending on that specific event. So you really are probably going to have to go back to your technical team to find out about that specific event. But there's some things you can do to create a dialogue with upper management so that they become more involved and that you find out what it is that their expectations are. The next response we got was, is this normal? So I can understand why upper executives are asking whether a problem is something that we have happen all the time, or if this is something exceptional. And the challenge for you as the manager of the monitoring team is, how do you both reassure and also demonstrate that this is in fact abnormal, or yep, we see these things all the time, depending on what the situation is. So one of the first ways you can do that is by utilizing the baselines that are built into the SolarWinds product. And if you look on the screen here, I've got two things, CPU and memory capacity, and it's a forecast chart, which means that we've taken the data that we're already collecting on a minute-by-minute basis, basically, and we're then extrapolating when we would run out of that. So here you can see the CPU and you can see the trend line, how it's generally rising, but also based on the utilization of the machine and how much it has, it's telling you that you'll be at warning at 80% in a year or just under a year. You'll be at critical at this point. You'll be at capacity at this point. Same thing for memory, same thing for disk. So we've built in these baselines into a variety of places within the tool to help be able to predict when you're going to run at capacity and also what's normal. I'll also tell you a secret trick, which is that you can base your alerts off of these things. Instead of setting a fixed threshold of an alert at 90 or 95 or whatever it is, you can say when it's X% over baseline. And that way, that one alert threshold is going to be true across your organization for machines that generally run hot, but also for machines that generally don't run at the peak of their capacity. Another tool you can use to demonstrate whether this is normal or not is PerfStack, or Performance Analyzer, which you see on the screen here. This is where you can take metrics from across your environment, anything you're monitoring, whether it's an application or a piece of hardware or anything else. And you can show that in a time synchronized graph side by side to show how a use case, it's our order entry system, it's our edge routers, it's whatever it is, right? And you can show all of that in one place over time, whether that time is the last 12 hours, the last 7 days, the last 365 days, whatever it is. And that way you can put it up on a screen and say, well, it was running like this up until this point, and then it started running like that. Is it normal? No. Yes. Yes, it's normal for the end of the month. Yes, it's normal for March. Who knows? But this is another tool you can use to demonstrate whether something is normal or not. But really what we're getting down to is that this is an issue of reporting. And that's something that we heard a lot of. Reporting was the question that we heard about more than any other in this survey. Across all the different questions we asked, reporting popped up as the thing I wish I had known or whatever it is. And so we have over 200 reports that are included with the Orion toolset with SolarWinds modules that will give you displays anything from a graph to different arrays and percentages to, just a simple chart, a table. But when you're asking, is it normal? What you're really asking is, can I see the trend? Can I see the history? And history is a function of reporting. So there's a lot of resources you have at your fingertips to build reports that answer that question of how has it been doing and is what I'm experiencing right now normal? And building on the whole question of reports, which, like I said, came up more than anything else, there is a variety of resources for you to get started. There's some SolarWinds Lab episodes that we start from the very simple to the very complex. And also at this point, I really do need to let you know about SolarWinds Academy, which is a place that has both on-demand and real-time training that gets into reporting, both advanced reporting and beginner reporting and things like that. The piece of advice I would give you, though, is don't try to do the most complicated thing you can think of first. Start simple. Start with something that's clear, concise, simple, achievable. Build just that, and then build onto that, and add onto that, and add onto that. That way, your knowledge and experience of reporting, and when I say you, I mean you and your team, can grow. Seek out the reports that people are asking for that sound familiar, that sound relatable, and try to build those first. that's going to get you a lot further in terms of both the facility with which you can create those resources and also the success you're going to have pushing them out in a way that's going to satisfy the original request. The third question of the survey was, are there any other monitoring blind spots you'd like us to address, answer, or explain? And again, we got some really interesting answers to this. Everything from vendor specific, when are you going to cover this device, to things like that. I'm just going to cover a couple of questions with the time I have left in the session. The first response, proper training on how to use Orion SDK, SWCL, and Swiss beyond the GitHub Wiki and THWAC forum. There should be a full training course and implementation guide. Yes. Absolutely. No disagreement from me. We work every day to build the library of resources for the SDK and things that are using it or leveraging it. However, I do need to emphasize that the complexity that you perceive with the SDK really has less to do with that than it does with the modules the SDK ties into. Let's think about it. SolarWinds has over 36 modules that it uses, and the complexity of all the different things it can do, and the SDK ties into that, is really where you're seeing things get complicated. At the end of the day, the SDK lets you do a set of CRUD operations. It's just it can do it very gracefully and do some really cool things with them. So my suggestion to you and the team when you're getting started with the SDK is the same as what I said for reports. Start simple. Start with a simple hello world. Really, like, can I get the information about a node? Can I then walk all of my nodes and get information out of it? Can I update one little thing, a custom property, whatever it is? Just start with that. When you have those essentials down, then you'll be able to build out more complex operations. But I think a lot of people get stuck because they see that amazing, cool 5,000 line SDK program and they want to go straight for that. So try to avoid that temptation and just start simple. That said, we do have resources for you. Once again, the SolarWinds Academy has a couple of classes that train specifically on the SDK. So you're going to want to check those out. Also, SolarWinds Lab 86 dove all the way into it. And a couple of years ago on THWAC Camp, we had a session, there's an API for that, where the focus was on the API, but really what we were doing was some very basic things with the SDK and showing how to do it in PowerShell and Perl, because Perl. And the last response I'm going to cover, management sees red indicators, but they do not know if it's really bad or it's just routine. NOC staff sees alerts or red indicators and they check things out, but they don't identify the issue for other SOC team members or management. If a device is down for maintenance or the site is moving for some other non-outage purpose, it would be nice to show it as acknowledged by the NOC staff and action has been taken. So this is where a service desk tool falls into play. And I know I talked about it at the beginning of the session, and I reached out to my fellow head geek, Liz Beavers, to get her opinion on it. And she and I had a really great conversation about it that may turn into its own video along the way. But really what we're talking about is that it's not enough just to have like temperature checks or up downs or whatever. You need the context, don't you? You need to know whether it's down, or like you said, maintenance down or something like that. The context is going to come in your service desk, in your ticketing system, where people can update with what they're doing. Along with that context is, do we need to take action on it just this one time, or is this a persistent problem that we're seeing either on this system, whether it's a device or an application, or across the environment with multiple devices or multiple systems? All those things are going to be contained within your service desk tool, not within necessarily your monitoring tool. With that being said, when you talk about customizations, what would be incredibly useful is to have the screens that you already have in monitoring that show you what's up, what's down, what's happy, what's not happy, and then be able to pull in the information from your service desk tool, whether it is the SolarWinds Service Desk or something else, it doesn't matter, but bring that in to show the tickets that are in flight at that moment, even better if they're clickable, so that on one screen you have the ability to see the status of the environment and what work is being done. That's really what you're talking about, is having a status screen. And by combining the built-in functionality of the SolarWinds tools along with the SDK, along with the bidirectional capabilities that you have by connecting your service desk tool along with your monitoring tool, you're able to display all those things in a meaningful way for management who really at the end of the day doesn't want to actually touch things. They want to know that's being worked on and they want to know where they're at with something, especially if it's deemed to be business critical. Now, these are by no means the only questions we received in response to the survey. When we first put it out, I committed to answering every single question you asked, and I am going to do that. So for more questions that managers of monitoring ask and the answers that I can provide, check out my ongoing blog series on thwack.com.